Anyway, why the title Satan's Gold? Al-Qaeda calls the United States the Great Satan, and they call Wall Street, the center of our financial empire, Satan's Gold. So that's where the title came from. The book, what is Satan's Gold about? I used to work for Bell Labs in Chicago on the Federal Reserve's network. They used, in those days, they called it FEDNET. Now they've since patented and copyrighted the term FedWire. But back in those days, it was called FEDNET. Satan's Gold is a financial thriller about a CIA financial analyst known as Daemon, who steals billions of dollars or billions of rubles from the Russian Federation and turns his genius to plundering the richest prize of all, the United States Federal Reserve. Only one man stands in his way, disgraced former FBI agent Tyler Jackson, who's destroying his life and his relationship with his fiancée by trying to find Daemon before the world's economy comes crashing down. The character Tyler Jackson, I'll get this in a minute, is based on a guy I know, Special Agent Doug Hansen from the FBI. But Satan's Gold has been vetted by Doug Hansen and is similar to The Insider, The Ascendant, or Fox's 24, which has been a while. Satan's Gold has intense action scenes, a love triangle, a very strong female character that will appeal to women readers. Currently working on the second novel in the Tyler Jackson series, Second Worst Mistake. All right, so one thing I always get from people all the time is how difficult was it to get Satan's Gold published? And it's very difficult. Most people don't really know anything about, let me put this, let me zoom in. They don't know much about the Federal Reserve, and they don't know how somebody could hack the Federal Reserve. But I don't know how many different agents were approached and different things, but the book made it all the way to the very end at Penguin. Tom Colgan, who's the executive editor of Tom Clancy, before Tom Clancy died, it went all the way to his desk. So if it made it all the way to Tom Colgan, then that's as far as it can go. He said that it had a plot that they had never seen before, and he sees hundreds and hundreds of books, but he eventually passed because he said the action was too slick. I emailed him back for more information, but never found out what that meant. So the book is published by Grand Canyon Press. It's won an award for best crime thriller, and it's out on Amazon, and it's out in Goodreads. So I get emails from people all over the world. Got one from Australia, got one from a woman in London. So it's nice to hear from people. And and a lot of people say, this right here, Satan's Gold isn't the type of book I would normally pick up, but I'm very glad I did. So, so where did Satan's Gold come from, and why does it affect everyone here? So there was two events that started me writing Satan's Gold, and the first was the Chicago flood. On April 13th, 1992, there were some contractors that were doing repair work on a bridge spanning the Chicago River, and they accidentally went into a utility tunnel underneath the Chicago River. Now, I don't know if people know this, but the word Chicago is a Native American term for swamp. So Chicago's actually, most of Chicago is below Lake Michigan. So if there's a problem, things flood out really easy. Anyway, they broke into a tunnel. They flooded out all of downtown Chicago and took out the federal FEDNET because they had ran all their fiber optic cables under there. And so for, I think, 3 days, the Federal Reserve in Chicago was out. I mean, it was gone because nobody could get there because the wires were underwater. So they eventually, Bell Labs, we had to run more fiber cable to get around. The second thing that happened was a squirrel got into the commodities, the Chicago Commodities Exchange, and on the network, and chewed up a bunch of wires and took out the Federal Reserve there and the exchange. So that was a different one happened, and the squirrel actually went to squirrel heaven because it electrocuted the poor squirrel. But anyway, everybody's had problems with their identity being stolen or different things like that. I also had one thing where my company switched to a new payroll provider and asked everybody to put in their direct deposit information again, and they transposed 2 of my digits, and so I didn't get paid. It was a couple days later, I got a call from the Federal Reserve saying, hey, they got a electronic transfer that they can't put into the bank because the numbers were incorrect, but they talked to the bank and they said, was my name Michael Ewing, and was I missing a pay? And I said yes. So they put the money back, but by that time I'd already called my company. So about at the end of the month, I actually got paid 3 times. I got paid for my normal pay. I got paid by the Federal Reserve, and then I got paid again by my company. And then I tried to convince them, look, hey, I got paid twice for the same paycheck. We got paid once a month at that time. And they didn't believe me. It took them 2 years before I got called into my manager's office and said, hey, you've been embezzling funds. We need you to pay us back for this. And then I said, well, I didn't do it. And here's all the proof that I didn't. And when I talked to you guys said I was wrong and you were right. And so anyway, so the Federal Reserve, everything, the money that goes in there is not really money. All it is just digits on a screen. That's the thing to remember about the Federal Reserve, is that, or any bank, it's just a number in a database. It's a number on a screen. That's pretty much how it is. So, all right. So how I came up with the plot of Satan's Gold, lots of books and movies of people breaking into things and stealing money. Like Die Hard. Everybody's seen Die Hard or Ocean's 11. I want a plot that was unique, and I remembered what happened with the Federal Reserve, and I started wondering what would happen if somebody tried to break into the Federal Reserve, and what would happen if they did. And then I took it one step further and said, you know what, doing just taking money is sort of boring. I mean, there's been a million books, there's been a million movies made about it. What would happen if somebody didn't put money in the Federal Reserve, but they didn't take it out, they actually put it in? And the reason for that would be if they wanted to take out the United States economy, where they didn't know what transactions were good and which transactions were bad. And keep in mind that trillions of transactions go through the Federal Reserve network every single day. So the importance of trust. The entire network is internet is based on trust. So in order for you to get out to, Google, for example, you have to trust Google as a website, and Google has to trust you. And especially for electronic transactions where you're taking money from one bank to another, then the computers have to trust each other. Normally that's done with what's known as SSH, or secure shell. And part of my job that I work on is my company does billions and billions of dollars in transactions. And I'm the guy that keeps all that stuff going. And I'm the guy behind the curtain, like the Wizard of Oz, that they said, pay no attention to that guy. I'm the guy that keeps all the banks running for my company with the billions and billions of dollars. But in order for that to work, it's all based on trust. So if you want to put money in your bank, then you have to trust your bank that they're going to take your money and keep it. And your bank's going to they're going to trust you that you don't have viruses or something like that. So let's see, I work on systems that communicate with thousands of vendors and banks every day. Most of communication is done by exchanging encryption keys. So they trust each other. What brings up the obvious question, what if that trust is exploited? Okay, so in my book, I explore trust in the New York financial district. This is actually a part of the book right here. I'll read it. Wilkins, who is a manager at the FBI, lifted his homely face. For the first time, Jackson saw worry in the old man's eyes. We know for years that Daemons wanted to go after the financial district. Think about the kinds of numbers that go through those systems. Billions of dollars cross those networks every day. Computer automation has gotten so tightly integrated into our lives that a computer hiccup could easily become a global disaster at mainframe speeds. A butterfly beating its wings on Wall Street really can start a financial hurricane in China. I don't even want to think about what would happen if he were to gain access. Jackson started to protest, but Wilkins held up a veined hand. Financial markets are built on trust every bit as much as actual currency. For automated high-speed net systems to work, you and I and everyone else must trust the automation that allows it to work. Billions of electronic transactions happen every day. It's actually trillions. All of it networked through tens of thousands of routers and switches pushing packets across electronic highways. Our networks have gotten so sophisticated and reliable that moving currency has become routine. So routine, in fact, that no one thinks about it anymore. Wilkins held up his phone. With this, I can walk into a store and instantly purchase anything. With nothing more than a few electrons, I can buy a new car or even a house. Think about the trust, Jackson, then think about what would happen if it stops. A car backfired nearby. His team on the sidewalk jumped like a bomb had gone off. Jackson had a very bad feeling. Why are you here? Wilkins smiled. That's one good piece of news I have. I'm here to offer you your job back. I might not agree with your approach, but you get results. We both want the same thing. Find Daemon while there's still enough time to do something about it. All right, so that's just fiction. Does it happen in real life? Well, years back, I went into and David's bridal because my wife needed to go to a wedding shower and with her, and then I paid for something. And then that week, all of a sudden, I guess 39 bridesmaids dresses was purchased using my credit card, overnighted to Florida, where they were put on a container ship to Africa. It all came out to be over $45,000. And even after I told them and said, hey, you know what? There's no reason why I need dozens of bridesmaids dresses. You need to stop this. They couldn't, because the machines had trusted each other. And in order for them to break the trust, which would cancel the transactions, they would have to break the trust. They said they'd been pre-approved. And so they basically had to sit there and watch all these bridesmaids dresses be shipped down to Florida, then sent to Africa. So I got my money back, but the credit card company, they had to absorb that cost. So recently, and I don't know if everybody's heard of it, but the Russian government targeted software vendor called SolarWinds as a hack that was the Russian, I think they're called I can't remember the name of the internet group, I guess that they called it themselves. But anyway, they hacked into SolarWinds over in Bulgaria, where they're doing their software development. And as one of their last steps in creating the SolarWinds product, the Russians would inject their virus into the SolarWinds source code. And then as soon as SolarWinds would make their new version of their software, SolarWinds would send an alert out to all their customers via trust and say, hey, you've got a new version of SolarWinds, please update. Now, it's just not SolarWinds. Microsoft does that to everyone. So does Google and Apple. I used to work for Apple, so I know all about it. But Android does it, the iPhone does it. But like, for example, Microsoft, they have one Tuesday a month is their day that they update Microsoft Windows. So everybody's seeing that they've got updates to Windows. Well, you're trusting Microsoft that their product is not hacked. Well, SolarWinds was the same thing. and only they were hacked. So SolarWinds, when they pushed their new version of their software, just like Microsoft pushes in a new version of Microsoft Windows, went out to all their customers and installed a virus. And that virus was on everyone's system for 9 months. That includes the government, Social Security Administration, for example. Microsoft got hacked. It was on their system for 9 months. The hackers that actually looked at the source code, that's what Microsoft is admitting so far, that they were actually looking at the source code for Microsoft Windows. But most of the time on this stuff, people don't say much, especially corporations, because they want you to trust them. If Microsoft went and told the world, yeah, hey man, we got hacked, and we're going to get hacked tomorrow, and the day after that, you're going to keep trusting them with Microsoft Windows, and then you running your banking software on Microsoft Windows. It's the reason why they don't want to say anything. Okay. My company doesn't actually use SolarWinds, but I have my own monitoring system called 911. It's the exact same thing, is that all the systems that I monitor, they trust my master, my 911 master server. And 911 every 10 minutes goes out and checks all the servers to make sure that there isn't a problem. For example, like the communication gateway that communicates with all the banks, it checks it every 10 minutes to make sure that there isn't a problem with that. But if someone was to hack into the master 911 server, they would have access to all the clients. Okay. All right, so I mentioned this before, how I came up to the protagonist for Satan's Gold. That was, the guy's name is Doug Hansen. He's an FBI agent, and his specialty is white collar criminals. Let me tell you, Doug is a bulldog. You guys can all feel good about the fact that this guy is out there protecting you, because I have never seen anybody like this. He was actually my roommate for a few years. The guy was obsessed with his job. He works weekends and evenings. He never stopped thinking about it. Watching him work, this part right here, watching him work, I vowed to never give Doug a reason to go after me. So like I tell the security people at my job, yes, I could steal billions of dollars. I could do it right now. All these different transactions are going through my company into Wells Fargo, for example. I could easily change, before it's transmitted, I could change the account numbers to my bank. But would I want to do that? No, because there's a Doug Hansen out there. There's lots of Doug Hansens out there. Plus, you know what? My freedom and my life is more important to me than money. But my word, I never want to have a Doug Hansen come after me after what I saw, what he was doing. There's a character in the book called Dixie Stevens. She's hired by the main character in the book to help him find Daemon. Specifically, she was hired by him to track all the financial stuff going on. And Dixie Stevens is based on a private detective that Doug worked with that he introduced me to. She was an expert in finding people. She found somebody that down in Mexico who had gotten a new job. There's a federal warrant on the arrest for the guy. He got a new job, and somebody happened to post his name along with some other people for a management training program for him to be a manager or something, maybe a convenience store or something. Anyway, all of a sudden it wasn't there one day. Next day it was. She found it, got the guy arrested. So that's just one of them. She's an expert in it, and that's why I based Dixie Stevens on the person in my novel. Okay, so the antagonist for Satan's Gold. The antagonist, there's a saying in writing: you like your protagonist, but you love your antagonist. Without the antagonist doing something, the protagonist has nothing to do. So the protagonist is the guy with the white hat. He's the good guy. The antagonist is the bad guy. He's the guy with the black hat. If your antagonist doesn't do anything, then the good guy basically is sitting around watching TV and helping his kids with their homework, that sort of thing. So your antagonist is the most important thing for your book. So for Satan's Gold, I needed someone who was an expert in computer networks. I needed someone who had the motivation to go out to Federal Reserve. Most hackers who are good, they stay away from high profile targets. They remain hidden, so no one knows who they are or that they were even involved in something. That's the reason why these hackers that did SolarWinds, that hacked the government, including the Social Security Administration and the VA. My wife got hacked through the VA. They were hidden for 9 months. So most hackers, they're very, very quiet. They're very, very secretive. So I needed somebody to base the antagonist on, and I eventually said, okay, how would I get into the Fed? So the antagonist is sort of based on me, unfortunately. Not that I'm going to go out and steal billions, although I could do it today, but I don't want to. So there's also one thing about billions of dollars. When Putin came into power in Russia, billions of dollars left Russia, and they all got sent through London and then through New York, and then they moved offshore. So the money came into New York from England and then moved through thousands of accounts through hundreds of banks all over the world before ending up on an island of Madeira off the coast of Spain. The FBI investigated, they were able to locate the money. They never got the people who'd taken the money out of Russia who ended up with it after it disappeared. All they could do is prosecute the bankers who had moved the money illegally through New York. And I remember reading that, and I looked at what I knew about the Fed on FEDNET, and I was like, you know what? What would happen if money moved into the Federal Reserve? What would happen if people couldn't trust what money was real and what money was fake? What would happen if all of a sudden everybody was given $1 million in their checking account? Everybody, not just one person here or there because of a banking screw up, but what would happen if everybody got that? I mean, the entire world would stop. Think about it. All right, so the importance of baggage. There's, if you're going to write a book, you want characters that have lots of baggage. More complicated, the better. The more things they got going on, you want anchors attached to their ankles. All right, especially for the antagonist. The antagonist has to have a reason to do what he does, other than just money. Money's boring. You have to give him a reason. All right. Let's see. With Dixie Stevens, I try to put her in a no-win situation. She hacked the government because of love. She's in love with a guy. Guy got caught by the NSA, got put away, so she hacked the government, put in a virus that took out most of the internet. This actually happened about 20 years ago. It was actually a guy, not a woman, who did it. He hacked SendMail for Unix, the SendMail process that forwards emails, hacked it, didn't realize what he'd done. He took out everything. And he spent 5 years in prison because of it. All right, a ticking clock. You want to have, if you ever notice with the series 24, that they always got that 24, the little ticking clock on the screen. It's like 60 minutes on Sunday evening. They always have the clock going. So you always want a ticking clock that keeps everybody moving along as quickly as possible. If you've ever seen the series 24 Alias, they always end with a cliffhanger. If you ever watch a daytime drama or soap operas, they always end up with cliffhangers. I mean, they're very, very good about that. All right, so I talked a little bit earlier about how hard it was to get Satan's Gold published, because most people don't really quite understand, or that money has become so boring that people don't really want to think about it. But getting back to one of the review, the person said, it's not the normal type of book I would pick up, but I'm glad that I did. One person wrote and said, I got done reading it and I wanted to take all the money out of the bank. All right. How hard is it to write a book? Well, pretty hard, because you have to come up with an idea that people want to see. Then you actually have to write it. Then you have to edit it. Then it has to go through editors, and it has to go through all the different publishers and everything else. And then you have to find somebody that actually, wants to put their name and their money behind it. And then it has to go through their editors. And then eventually it'll get published, but it's very difficult. So, all right, how much money am I making off Satan's Gold? Nothing. All the earnings going into marketing the book. I told the the publisher that, you know what, I want you guys to market the book. I don't need the earnings on it because I've got the next one done and I'm working on the third one now. So the more we market this one, the better the second one. All right. The importance of paragraph, first page, and the first chapter. Everybody goes into the bookstore. They pick up a book, and what do, they look at the back cover, they look at the front cover, look inside the cover, they look at the log line, you know, the little tiny 2 or 3 sentences of what the book's about, and then a lot of people will read the first chapter in the bookstore to see if it's something that they want. So most agents will tell you they don't want a first chapter that's more than 5 pages long. That's because it seems like the world has ADHD. And it's getting worse. Everybody has their phone. Everybody has, you know, TikTok. Everybody has YouTube going. Everybody has Messenger. Everybody has Zoom. Everybody has, you know, Microsoft Teams. So attention spans are getting very short. It's really hard to get somebody to read anymore, actually. And so they want the first chapter to be smaller and smaller. So that is the thing. Let's see. I don't know what time is it now. Oh, 8:29. Okay. All right. So I'm going to, I guess before I can read the first chapter, or I can take questions. It's up to everybody.
Why don't we have some group participation?
Okay.
Use this time for that.
Okay.
Does anybody have anything that they'd like to contribute as far as maybe your experience with writing, or maybe the material presented, the computer safety?
Has your identity been stolen? Everybody raise your hands whose identity has been stolen.
Everybody, I bet.
Yep.
Maybe take it off screen share so that we can see each other.
Okay.
Thank you. Bill and Anita have their hands up.
Michael, I was curious about what you were curious about, that the action was too slick. Now, I'm wondering if you ever heard that sort of comment from anybody else besides that one guy, like any readers or any other reviewers, or was that just sort of a one-off kind of curious statement?
I'd never heard it from anybody that sent us back into with the editors, trying to figure out why it was too slick. I know that you know, maybe it was more too convenient, that things maybe possibly worked out, you know, for the good too fast. But I mean, that working on that was maybe a year of going back and looking at all the different action and rewriting a bunch of stuff.
Okay, so just curious. Thanks.
Now, Tom Colgan sees hundreds and hundreds of books every year that go across his book desk. So I'm sure he gets a little bit jaded, like, oh, great, another thriller, you know.
Nita?
I, for one, would be interested in you reading at least the first page or a couple of paragraphs, because I've always heard the idea of, you know, the first sentence is so powerful. And I'd love to hear your first sentence.
That's okay. Before I do that, I must have rewritten chapter 1 hundreds of times. I mean, there's no more difficult thing to do. I mean, it is by far the hardest thing to do. And I mean, I hated it, to be honest. And when if you go through writers groups, which I did, everybody's doing, when they're editing in the writers group, there seems like you get 99% of your comments on the first chapter, and then they abruptly get used to your style. And then abruptly, all of a sudden, all the stuff, the comments just go away. And then chapter 2, you have less. And then chapter 3, you have less. And then by the time you get to the end of the book or whatever, you get nothing. So, all right. So this is my copy. This is actually not, this is slightly different than what's published, because as part of the publishing process is that you have to compromise. I liked my version better. But this is not how it looks the first chapter. There's a couple of sentences that are different. Okay, Storms always reminded him of Suzanne, the last time they'd been happy, before she ground up his house key in the garbage disposal and FedExed him the repair bill. They'd been in the White Mountains of Arizona. Heavy black clouds threw bolts of lightning across the rolling sky, the rain coming down like her hair falling onto his chest. The cool breeze drifted through the open windows, her skin on his, the smell of wet grass and pine, and how her smile always started on the left side of her mouth. It had been a wonderful night, one of the best he could remember having with her since Daemon had shot him and ended everything. So that's the first paragraph. That paragraph took years to write. Unfortunately.
Wonderful. It's wonderful.
Michael had his hand up.
Yeah, I got to unmute. Hi, Michael. Very good presentation. I'm really impressed by what you accomplished. I have been in the book business since '89, but I'm all nonfiction. I've done 9 nonfiction titles in New York, and they're all technical and business. My question is, it's sort of interesting that the angle you've got. There's a genre in nonfiction which has been the coming financial collapse, and it's all about how all the churn in the economic universe is such that 5 years from now, the entire Federal Reserve, everything else, blah, 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 is all going to go bluey, and it's all going to blow up. And there have been about 7, 8 books of this kind that have been published very successfully. So your basic premise of this book touches on exactly the same thing, except you're doing something different with it. So I'd be sort of interested with what your comment is about how your book relates to that kind of a genre, and what kind of a twist did you do with it? And why do you think it was so difficult for you to sell your book, given how successful this other genre is?
With Satan's Gold, what ended up happening was the CIA, they recruited a French financial analyst, and then they recruited him to go after the Russians, and to gain access to the Russian Federation, their banks. And once they pulled out, just like what happened with Putin, they pulled billions of dollars out of Russia, and then nobody knew that the CIA had worked with this guy, and so the CIA offered up this guy as saying, he's the one who stole all this money out of the Russians, and then they tried to kill him. And except that he saw it coming and he disappeared, and then he got really angry. So then he set his sights on the Federal Reserve, United States Federal Reserve. The Fed is 19 times bigger than the Russian Federation, so it has 19 times more money going through there than what the Russians have. And so it wasn't the thing I didn't want to do is just some guy stealing money. I mean, Ocean's 11, you can see that anytime you turn around. But what would happen if this guy was betrayed? He thought he was doing a good thing for the world. He was hired to go, very similar to Alias with Jennifer Gardner, where she thinks she's working for the government. She's not. She's working for the bad guys. So this same thing with here, this Frenchman thought he was working for the CIA or the United States government. Turns out he wasn't. He was working for people that were trying to get billions of untraceable dollars and out of the Russians. And so, but anyway, he wasn't killed, and then he tried to go after the Federal Reserve. So, and by pumping billions and billions and billions of dollars into the Federal Reserve and then taking the Federal Reserve out. I mean, and And I know exactly how to take, because I've worked on like when I worked at Broadcom, or well, Apple's a great example. Apple in Arizona and East Mesa, they have a data center they've got 5 million physical servers in there. 5 million. And I was one of the Unix admins that kept it running. And their data center is so big that they actually have to raise the racks on both ends of their, these big rows of racks. They'd actually raise the racks 2 inches on both ends, because people would come in and they'd look at these racks stretching forever. And they say, hey, your rack isn't level. And they'd say, yeah, it is, but it's the curvature of the earth. Those racks were that long that the earth would curve, and they would say, your rack isn't level. So they actually raised the 2 inches on both ends so that it didn't look like they weren't level, because people started just complaining that your racks aren't level. But anyway, it's not that hard to take out compute grids. I work as a high performance computing engineer. I've worked at Motorola, I've worked at IBM, I've worked at Bell Labs, I've worked at Apple. When I worked at Broadcom, I had 11 data centers I kept running. In Irvine, California, there was 100,000 servers. In San Jose, they had 75,000 servers, and they're all running as a grid. And the Federal Reserve has their own grid. So the thing I thought was, okay, what happens if somebody drops a bunch of money into the Federal Reserve and then takes out their compute grid, and then takes out their backups, takes out all their storage filers and everything else, and all at the same time, and then takes out the financial system, exactly what you're saying. If you can't trust, and I brought that earlier, if you can't trust the money, then nobody knows what's good and bad. And it all just basically, and it's all based on these, SSH secure shell being able to go from one machine to another, and so that people trust. And I work with, dozens and dozens of banks every day, and we're constantly exchanging encrypt keys and public keys so that they can log without humans being involved. Bank A can log into my systems, drop money, or I can log into their systems and put money or take money. And it's all based on this trust. It's all based on these encrypt keys. And what happens, exactly like you're saying, what happens if that trust fails?
Okay.
It's a long explanation, but that's the reason why early in the presentation I brought that up.
Do you have any kind of customer feedback or any kind of reader feedback for the market on this book?
So far, I've gotten good. I mean, it's 4 out of 5 on Goodreads. It's I can't remember what the latest it was Amazon. It was like 4.3, 4.4 out of 5 on Amazon, which publisher says pretty good.
Okay.
So, but the book, I mean, I could make the book very technical. I don't. Because you know what, a lot of people, actually some of the reviews were in there, I didn't quite understand what was going on some of the time, but the book was written in a way it didn't, get me. I sort of thought about Tom Clancy when he write like Red October. There was a lot of information in there on submarines, and most people don't know anything about a submarine, obviously, because they've never been on a nuclear submarine. But he's got it in there. Most people, you just reach the stuff you don't understand, you just skip it forward and keep going. I tried to do the same thing with the book here, where it's interesting enough you don't have to understand the technology behind it.
Okay, so one final thing I just say is, on a book like this, which is a page turner, how fast do you think it just evaporates in the reader's mind when they finish it? Just how fast does it go away?
Well, I mean, one person, a professional reviewer, said it got to the end and they wanted to remove their money from the bank. So it is really difficult because, like I said earlier, the world has a case of ADHD. We're pulled in, 300 different directions at all times. And I mean, there's anything from, well, for example, I worked with someone, a woman that she'd have her text messaging on her phone going. She had messaging going through Microsoft Teams. She had music going, and then she had email up. And while she's trying to do all that, she was trying to write code. And I don't know about everybody else, but when I went to college, I did all my studying in the library. Had to be quiet. I didn't do it at the frat house. And her code sucked. It was not good because she was being pulled in every single direction. But, you know, for me, I used to study in the library with earplugs in, but that's just how it was. I have a master's degree in computer science. So, but some people thrive on the ADHD thing where they've got 10 different things going at once. If you've got small children at home and you're working through the pandemic, I mean, that's very much being pulled in multiple directions. So it's hard to concentrate with that stuff. But yeah, the world is going where instead of 15 minutes of fame, I'd say it's getting closer to maybe 1 or 2.
Dana,
Thank you.
The
Thank you
thing
very
that
much.
hearing your story and recognizing how some of you, Tom Clancy, they're almost like training films about how something works or how the spy network operates and all that. Have you considered moving your story into motion media like TV or film?
At one point, I had it was actually a producer, and you know, and it was probably, I don't know, maybe 7 years ago. They had read early copies of it, and they reached out to me, and you know, and I sent them the synopsis or the synopsis. Synopsis is something completely different. I sent them the synopsis and you know, and the pitch, and sent them a draft version of things, and then I never heard from them again. I had an agent that agreed to represent me. They wanted a bunch of changes, so I spent a year making all the changes, and then went back to the agent and said, "Okay, it's all done. Here you go." And the agent's like, "Who are you?" So I had to send him the contract that she'd signed, and then she looked it over and said, "You know what? I guess I'm just not interested anymore on this."
It just seems like a really good story. And,
Yeah.
you know, with the special effects people having their moment in the sun right now, it just seems like for some of these really elaborate moves that you see on screen, I'd give it another shot. I've become more visual, although I work on books and I do a lot of other stuff. I've become very visual in terms of what comes at me, and I fall into that ADHD category of just short. My attention span has become very short. It's really close to just now.
Right. Same thing with me too. I've got 3 small children at home, and my wife is a physician, so she's working 80 hours a week. And she works 7 days on and 7 days off. So the 7 days that she's on, I don't see her. So I have 3 little kids at home. It's really hard to concentrate.
in writing a book like this, I've always wondered, is this all you think about when you're in it? I mean, are you constantly you're doing what you have to do, but is your mind constantly creating and questioning? And do you ever get a break from the creativity?
One thing I found out, and it's the reason why I don't write code. I'm a Unix admin instead. I'm not a programmer. I've been a programmer in the past. Is that if I write code, then I can't write books. I don't know what it is. It's like the writing computer code comes from the same well as writing books. And so you get done all day long, you're writing code, and then you get home and you look and you're like, I don't really want to do this anymore. So I don't write. I write code, but I'm not a programmer. So that's not my primary focus. I have to interface with all the banks, and it's all written with Perl. It's a programming language called Perl, for the most part. But it's fairly fast. I'd say less than 20%. But yeah, I can't. If I do code, I can't write. As far as letting it go, it's a very difficult thing. Now, like I said, I have 3 little kids going on, so I mean, they've got your attention, and but I enjoy thinking about plots. People say that I'm very good at writing car chases, for example, or action scenes. I've been told that I write better action scenes than anything they've ever read before. But I write very visually. People say they read the book like with the first paragraph with the hair on his chest and the rain coming down and the clouds and the pines and everything. And I like that outside my window right now because I'm up in the White Mountains. It's heavily wooded. There's fires up here all the time. Not this year because of all the rain, but yeah, it's very visual. I don't actually like turning it off. I like it on. I ride my mountain bike every single day, and while I ride my mountain bike, I'm thinking about writing. I mean, the mountain biking, going up and down mountains with rocks, especially at 8,000 feet in elevation where I am right now, is not easy. It sort of hurts, like your legs and your lungs and everything else. So I put my mind elsewhere. So.
Michael, if there's anything else you want to say in conclusion, this is kind of the end of the time we have for your presentation.
I guess the big one is if somebody's sending you an email that looks like it's too good to be true, like it's a link, or on your Android phone where it's make $1 million from home, and they want you to touch that link. Before you do that, take your mouse, hover over it without clicking on that link. Hover over the link, look in the bottom left corner of your browser and see where it's actually going. And people like the IRS, they will not send you email. They will not call you on the phone. They will send you a letter. Same with most of your banks. You can opt in for your bank to tell you if there's weird stuff happening, like my son was he was buying stuff on his Xbox, and I didn't know. All of a sudden on a Sunday morning at church, my phone goes off saying, "We got some unusual activity going on your checking account from Roblox." But yeah, don't click until you know exactly what you're clicking on. That's how Solar Winds got hacked.
That's good advice.
Yeah, thank you very much. We all need that, and we need to be reminded. Excellent presentation. We really appreciate your time and energy and the wonderful, wonderful job you did with us this morning.